like this to make this kind of fair selection happen. And what you've seen here is really the tip of the iceberg. I mean, when you see the balls bouncing around in the cage, it looks like that's the process. That's about 1% of this process, or less. You know, it took many hard working folks to put together a fair process that we believe gave everybody a fair shot, and at the same time made sure that only folks that met our qualifications made it into what you saw today in the lottery process. So I really thank you, Janet, for your whole team in operations. Where's Harmony? Did she go home already? She stepped out for a second, but Harmony's team has been fantastic through this whole thing. Don, thank you for your leadership as assistant director. Tom Salo, thank you for all the dozens of one-on-one meetings about some of the close calls that we had to talk about through this whole process. But the bottom line is it really takes a team effort to make something like this happen, and I'm really proud of the effort that everybody here at the department, you know, just proud of the whole effort. So
let's start off with the basics. Number of people who actually were in the drawing today, number of dispensary authorizations provided.
Okay, so today we issued, well, today we allocated, which is different from issuing. I know it's going to sound like inside baseball to you, but we allocated 97 dispensary registration certificates today. We had been planning to allocate 99, but in 2 of our districts called community health analysis areas, there's a dispute that made it into the court system, and we've been asked by the courts to withhold issuing or allocating those registration certificates. So it's a total of 97 today, most likely either 98 or 99 within the next few weeks, depending on how those court cases go. There were a total of 68 drawings today, so 68. This machine was opened 68 times and balls were put in and selections were made. Some of the CHAs had just 2 applicants and there were some with more than a dozen. So there were 68 drawings. There were a total of 404 folks who were in competitive drawings, and 29 of the community health analysis areas where there was only 1 applicant. Obviously you don't have to have a drawing for 1 person. So so there was 29 in non-competitive CHAs with just 1 applicant, 404 total candidates for those competitive CHAs. Those are the districts with 2 or more qualified applicants.
And can you explain to us the qualification process for those people to enter into this drawing today?
Yes, it was actually a several week, actually a couple of month process to get to this point today. A few months ago we opened the opportunity for folks to apply for dispensary registration certificates. The regulations are up on our website. We had checklists and so forth to guide people through the process. There was really a 2-step process to get through the entire application selection process. First it's called administrative review. The second step was called substantive review. There was a lot of back and forth between our team and the applicants because the majority of the applicants needed something to complete their application after they first turned it in, and so we sent out literally dozens, if not hundreds, of things called RFIs, or requests for information, to sort of get back and forth with applicants to fill in the gaps that they may have had in their applications. That process actually proceeded all the way up into yesterday, when we made a couple of final decisions about a couple of the applicants yesterday. So the process has really been going on for many weeks, and today was just the final event for the allocation of the dispensary registration certificates.
Was there anyone there right now in the drawing that you're not so sure if they completely qualified, or everyone in the drawing today is qualified?
We believe that everybody that was in the drawing today met our requirements. And, you know, we had pretty specific requirements in our regulations. We had a lot of checklists to help people through that process. We had requirements that folks get documentation from their local jurisdictions. Not every jurisdiction provides the same sort of guidance, and in that sense there was you know, some shades of gray throughout making these final decisions, but I've been involved in the process from the very beginning through the very end. I've got a lot of qualified people that I trust, and I think that we've made the right calls to get to this place. That's not to say that there aren't people out there that disagree with some of the decisions that we made throughout, you know, throughout this registration process. But you know, I'm comfortable that we made a real, true effort to do the right thing, to let the right candidates through, to be fair to everybody, and to give folks an opportunity to correct deficiencies in their application along the way.
So what happens now to the people whose balls were selected?
Okay, so if you heard harmony at the end, the next step is, this is just an allocation of a registration certificate. The next step is for a person from the applicant body, could be a board member or the principal officer, to get their dispensary agent card. There's a process on our website that they can do that. Once they demonstrate that they have a dispensary agent on board that meets our qualifications, they have their card in hand, they can then apply for the actual registration certificate. That certificate allows the applicant to proceed to build the rest of the dispensary and their cultivation facility, not to operate a dispensary. Nothing that you saw today authorizes anybody to operate a dispensary. It's an invitation, once they get their agent card, to proceed to the next step, which is to get their approval to operate. In order to get an approval to operate from us, they're going to have to demonstrate everything that they put in their business plan is in place. Security, computer infrastructure, agent database, agent paperwork, etc. So inventory control. So there's a whole host of things that they need to establish before they can call for a final inspection. At that point, if they pass that final inspection, they'd get an approval to operate from us, and that's the point where they could actually open the doors and begin selling to cardholders.
How fast can that process be? Like how quickly can we have a dispensary open its doors?
Well, it depends. You know, there are probably, on the folks that you saw today, there's probably a range of folks that are, many of whom are probably very close to ready to go because they have lease agreements in place, especially if they were in a non-competitive CHA and they knew they were the only applicant, they knew they were complete. Yes, they didn't get their registration certificate allocation until today, but they could still have done some paperwork and some negotiations with folks. And so there are probably some that are fairly close, you know, to asking for that final inspection. I don't expect anything until probably the end of August. And then there's probably some folks that were in the drawing today that were hoping for an allocation. Now they know they finally have that, but maybe haven't done a whole lot of the work behind the scenes to execute a real dispensary, and those folks may not have dispensaries up and running until spring.
But if they've gotten this far, they know what's coming, they know what they need to do, and more than likely
they should. If they don't know, they should have known. I mean, we have, and I would challenge anybody to look at any other state's medical marijuana program and find, you know, the sheer magnitude of information that we have up on our website. We've prided ourselves along the whole way here of making this a transparent a transparent program, and making sure that we really were providing the kind of information that potential applicants would need to follow the process all the way through, and so that really all of Arizonans would know how it is that we're operating this program. So
bottom line with these people today is that most likely they're going to be the ones that are operating dispensaries. These people that their balls were chosen, most likely they're going to be the ones that are operating the dispensaries.
Well, these are the applicants for the dispensaries, and so there'll be dispensary agents that work in many of these. But in other words, let me put it, sort of turn that on its side. You can't operate a dispensary in Arizona, at least for the next year, unless you were allocated a registration certificate today. Not to say that everyone who was allocated a certificate today is going to actually execute and get all the way through the process and open their doors. You know,
reopen the shop if someone wasn't able to do it.
So there's a process in our regulations and rules about what happens in subsequent years, and so you can go to the rules and see how it works in 2013. So it'll be the summer of 2013 when we do this again.
I think the question, though, was if somebody turns out to be unqualified.
Well, there's two ways that something could happen. Is that, let's imagine for a moment that one of the applicants today that got a registration certificate is unable to get that next step and get their certificate of occupancy from their local jurisdiction, whether that's a county or a city. That would prohibit them from meeting our final requirements to operate a dispensary, and for that reason, they may never open up their dispensary. And so some of the folks that went through the process today will no doubt not make it to the finish line and open their dispensary this year. If they don't execute and get it done this year, they're permanently disqualified from ever applying again, because they've demonstrated that we've allocated them a dispensary registration certificate and they didn't use it. We don't want that kind of folk, we don't want them in our system again, because they were unsuccessful the first time, and we want our dispensaries to be, we want the folks to get registration certificates to be successful.
Let me make sure, I just want to follow up on that. So let's assume they don't, and I don't know whether they got 10 months or whatever to complete the process. Are you going to give them the whole time and then just reopen in 2013? Or is there any chance you might find out 5 weeks from now somebody doesn't qualify and we'll be sitting here pulling new balls?
No, if somebody 5 weeks from now is unable to complete the process, that's an allocation that will lay fallow until next summer.
Okay.
Now, what percentage of Arizonans live in the, rough percentage of Arizonans live in the JAWS that have now allocated?
In other words, if everyone that was issued a certificate allocation today actually made it all the way through to the finish line, built their dispensary, well in excess of 98% of Arizonans would live within 25 miles of one of those dispensaries.
And are there any significant gaps within that? It's only 2%, I guess, of your...
Well, I mean, you know, if you look at the state, Arizona is a, you know, the core population is really in, you know, the valley here, Tucson. In all those urban areas, probably the area with the least number of areas here in a state. So when you draw a 25-mile circle, that encompasses. I mean, you take one dispensary, put it downtown Phoenix, and draw a 20. Just one dispensary covers a lot of folks in terms of the 25-mile. States have regulations that, you know, where every time. Arizona's an open system. That's in the voter-approved language. That's not from the regulations that we wrote.
How quickly do the home growers have to shut down?
So the folks, and I don't know the exact numbers. Maybe it's about 20,000. Right now, as dispensaries come online, come up for renewal of their cards, and they ask address up against our geolocated dispensary database, and if they're next year, we'll probably have far fewer home growers than we have late 2013, early 2014. There will be very few folks that are authorized to cultivate because there's just very few people that live or that will be living further than 25 miles from a dispensary.
Attorney General Tom Horn said that because he represents the Department of Health Services in current and future litigation, he is going to seek a deck judgment that all this is prohibited by some thoughts on having the Attorney General's office going to court to shut down what took you 2 years to set up?
Well, you know, to answer that question, Howie, I'll roll back in my mind back to the summer of 2010 when I very first read the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act as a draft initiative. It didn't have its signatures yet. I looked at that and I said, wait a minute, how is this going to work? This is in conflict with the Controlled Substances Act at the federal level. And, you know, you talk about that being a 600-pound gorilla. That's been a 600-pound gorilla going back to the summer of 2010, at least in Arizona. And I think it's obviously still there. There's no one's going to dispute the fact that there's a conflict between state and federal law when it comes to medical marijuana dispensaries, or the entire program for that matter. So, you know, by the voters control that part of the world in which I have influence. There are things that I don't have any control over, and it's not a real productive use of my time to fret about those things that I can't control. And so really my attitude is we're going to do the very best job that we can to put together as responsible a medical program that we can. But you know, there's wild cards out there. Obviously the third branch of government, you know, the judicial branch is, you know, a part of this that probably will become increasingly involved over time. What they're going to decide, I don't know. But I've just committed to taking this one day at a time. Today we issued the registration certificates. If at some point in the future, you know, this whole program or the dispensary part ends up in a court of law, and, you know, a judge orders us to stop because of the conflict, then obviously we'll stop. Another way we'd stop is if I felt like my team or myself were at the risk of being prosecuted, or imminent risk for being prosecuted for violating the Controlled Substances Act. That would be another reason why I would quit implementing the program. But to me, that's really you know, those are the two things. You know, court order to stop, or some evidence that our team is at risk for imminent prosecution.
Can you confirm for us the number of people who were in the lottery today? We're hearing 486. Is that still accurate?
Well, there were 404 balls in total that you saw bouncing around. And so in the competitive areas, the competitive CHAWs, there were 404 folks that were vying for those 68 certificates. There were 29 folks that were issued or allocated certificates today, but didn't have to go through the drawing. So 404 plus 29,
Right.
433. I didn't have a calculator.
27 shots that had no applicants. Is that right?
And 27 with no applicants, and 2 that are in limbo because there's disputes about various aspects of those 2 applications.
Talk about those two, where they are and what the disputes
Am I allowed to talk about that stuff? Where's Salo?
are. Not exactly, no.
I don't think I'm allowed to talk about individual applications.
Well, it's a matter of public record that you have an injunction in the White Mountain case in Sun City.
Howie, you come and do it. I mean, I'm prohibited from talking about these applications and where they are in the courts. I can tell you that there's 2 CHAWs that where there's a dispute about various aspects of that application. But just as a matter of self-preservation, I'm not going to talk about that.
Chicken.
Will, are there any areas of the state that are absolutely devoid of any dispensaries, ones that have absolutely no dispensaries at all?
Well, obviously, there are no dispensaries at all in the state right now. If you add up in total the number of allocated certificates that we put out today, you know, the major gap, I would say, is that Indian country basically is, you know, I don't think we issued a single allocated registration certificate today in Indian country. So really, our tribal areas of the state are predominantly the areas where you know, there won't be a future dispensary, at least throughout the rest of 2012 and into 2013.
we were watching this today, the white gloves, the way they're handling the balls. We saw one fall, and it was like craziness.
There was a protocol for that.
Why take this? Why treat it this way? Why
There's
such extreme measures?
There's two reasons why we did it the way we did it. Number one, I wanted to make sure that we had a completely fair process that was transparent from the beginning so that everybody that made it to this stage had confidence that the process today was fair. The second thing, and I'll just be honest about it, is I wanted to prepare in the event that someone disputes how fair this was, that I wanted to have all sorts of checks and balances in place so that if I ended up in Superior Court or something like that, I'd be able to pull forward folks that were independent auditors, checks and balances internally, a set of protocols that we followed so that we could be very clear to the court about how we proceeded, what we did, why it was fair, and here are the folks that you can depose.
You don't want to get sued.
I expect to get sued. I wanted to protect ourselves for when, or hopefully just if, that happens.
Do you have any counties where there aren't going to be dispensaries?
Do we have one in Greenlee?
There's one listed for Duncan Morency.
Is there a, Harmony, is there a county without an applicant? How about Tubac? Patty, no, there was one in Tubac, wasn't there? We'll have to get back with you on that. I'm not 100% sure. Harmony can look that up in a second.
So now that you bought this machine,
We're going to probably use it next summer.
Bingo parties?
bingo parties, can you pop popcorn in there?
But you can put your head in here, Howie.
So, Will, what constitutes?
You're full of hot air.
What constitutes, justification to expand the number of dispensaries?
So the actual act itself limits us to 126. Obviously, we just issued 97 today. We may be issuing as many as 99. The act provides for adding to that 126 total depending on the number of pharmacies that exist in the state. So it's 10% of the number of pharmacies in the state. So as Arizona gets more pharmacies, it's possible that that maximum number could end up going up to 127, 120.
So, in other words, you're not going to be issuing a whole lot more of these next year.
We'll see. We'll find out. All right, thanks, everybody.
I just have one more question, actually.
Yeah.
If anybody defaults and doesn't make the finish line, will somebody else be able to?
Not till next year.